Happy New Year! I'm going to try and give you a very brief news bulletin, because the rest of the world won't give you any news at all, because they're frozen in fear because their ownership of the world is being exposed. I want you to know that this girl thinks she's different from all the rest. She's the one that pretends that she's got the name of the Virgin Mary associated with her whole career. And that she's a little bit special. She was trained at the Kabbalah school like all the rest of the New World Order musicians, and her music is iconic. She's getting on a bit, and she would do really well to change her ways as she pretends in these songs. Another cover for the same song about some girls being pure of heart has a picture of a headless bald man in her hand. And I know that all these people are trained to steal from the world. Some of them might see that the time is ripe for a policy change, and that if they were to work for their customers and their fans rather than the government that created them, and the mind control centres like the Kabbalah schools for musicians in America. Britney Spears had the decency to drop out. She went the whole package into the postgraduate spectrum, where she pretends that she's something a little bit special and different from the others. I want you to take you now into the real news that these folk play their part in covering up. Okay, so when you look at the news in Lord Sainsbury's supermarket, which I'm confined to at the moment because I can no longer afford a newspaper, assuming that they are worth anything. They're not worth even the paper that they are written on, because the paper that they write on is privately owned, and they print the currency from the banks that should be owned by democracy. This is my namesake Lees, David Lees. He's resigned from the Bank of England very recently because of the disclosures to people that are heads of teaching unions, local regional leaders. I have been absolutely bombarding with the news that the public sector finances have been frozen for 7 years by this man, Dave Prentice. He's on the court of the Bank of England with all of those fraudsters that are named below. That's Bradley Freed, manager of Grove Point Capital LLP. They have limited liability in everything they do in the issuance of democracy's funds. Okay, Prentice is the Secretary General at Unison, 6-figure salary, 6-figure pensions. Now, you've been getting this news for weeks, but this is right at the end of 2014, and we're now into the 3rd of January, and I'm delighted to say that the world is still not at war. I've written to Her Majesty within the last 2 years. Her response to me was, the corruption may well be there, but constitutionally I cannot interfere in my own government's crimes. Okay, that's a picture of Mervyn King, George Osborne, Mark Carney, all of whom now are stealing through the Bank of England in Threadneedle Street in London. Okay, all of them are wearing the icons of the globalized world that she, Lagarde, represents, and she is the front person now for the IMF. We've got a woman in charge of the Federal Bank in America as well. Bernanke has gone. Those are trivial tweaks in the system, like Madonna claims that she is doing for the female gender. Nothing changes until it's exposed. I want you to know that when I made that video a few days ago on the rights to have sex, and the shocking declarations of Greg Hallett about how war is run by the skulls in America with links to the biggest banks that the world has access to. Yeah, I promised to reveal for you that I would do a little bit of research on the Mercers. The Mercers are another secret society. Their members are bound to pledges of deaths for their whole family to keep their organisation secret. And guess who runs the fickin' thing? St. Paul's School. Now, I may have told you in the past, or somewhere further down my timeline, about St. Paul's School, but its boss is a regular recipient of my emails. His name is Christopher Chambers, and he is the advisor to Prince Charles, who was educated at Geelong School in Australia, and the declaration that the Mercers and the ancient city and guilds that go back to the 13th century in the city of London are run by people that are connected to the Swiss banks and the royal prince is absolutely shocking in this day and age. And the pledges of loyalty to those warmongering city and guilds, yeah, so the Mercers is involved in the creation of haberdashery products. That's silk stockings like you trade with the Free French in wartime, when your family member decides that he prefers fascism and a peaceful life in Paris to being the king and being responsible for the decisions that his imbecilic in-laws have to make. That is the man who made the King's Speech. He's mentioned further down my web page and the headlines, but I want to take you to the thing that I believe is the straw that will break the camel's back. There's the student debt graph again from 1995, when every student all across the UK, Ireland, England, Wales, Scotland got their education for free. That is the bastard in chief, Lord Patten, previous at Lonro, previous at the BBC, previous at the Oxford Russia Fund, previous in giving contracts to the royal prince, who's still not pictured on here. And the people who get knighted and get access to sex with children are the people who get demonised by the BBC beyond the grave. That is Thatcher, this bastard who's imposed the fees, and now the student debt burden for a 4-year honours is £50,000 to £60,000 if you're unlucky enough to have chosen an elite university in England, where the Vice-Chancellor and all of the board and the court get undeclared 6-figure salaries to be non-executive directors on companies like Rolls-Royce, okay, and all sorts of economic publishing vents that pretend that the elite universities and the skulls and the Mercers do not understand what is happening. You must understand that St. Paul's is a religious girls' school, and that ties into the frauds that involve some of the greediest girls that the world have ever known. That's Mrs. Thatcher. And I've now given on the front page of my website a basic guide to all mothers who face the choice of sending their children into poverty through his system, yeah, and how the issuance of money for every public initiative should be done by habit and by policy making through the federal bank that the country owns. But no, we opt for democratic tyranny, and that is why I'm giving you a review of the news on the front page of my website, because nothing that you read in the papers is relevant to our children's future. This is a war criminal who trades from Stratford-on-Avon, and the rest of the web page tells you about how Stratford-on-Avon and even the writings of Shakespeare have been twisted to slot into the corrupted family history of the British monarchy for 160 illegitimate years. That covers the issues of Prince Eddie, his internment at Glamis Castle because of his involvement in the Jack the Ripper crimes in London, and the complete capacity of British literature and history to embed something like that in the vaults of a castle and just wait until the legitimate prince, who's got blood all over his hands, then transfers it to Lady Macbeth, and suddenly we have no culprits for massive crimes against the people and for the legitimacy of a family that is hopelessly twisted for all of that 160 years. Further down the web page you will see all about how this man has gone into war crimes proceedings, making accusations about the innocent incumbents of the people who just happen to live in Kurdistan, where he left at age 7, or it may have been 9, to join a public school like St Paul's in London. It was not St Paul's. This man is a personal friend of Tony Blair's spin doctors, now on rehab, now still unaccountable for massive amounts of money that they made in the lead up to the war in Iraq, which he has now deemed to be a war crime, from his parliamentary registered businesses, which are just geopolitical manipulation tools. And then we get more on how the elites all through this sector laugh at it. This is bringing in spates of resignations, because when you reveal that Mr Bean was the war correspondent for Gallipoli and they made a joke about him opening the London Olympics when Her Royal Highness made her appearance underneath a parachute, you do not get a bigger belly laugh at your dead family members who died for their country in global conflicts that have just been about balance sheets and directorial business registers, like this one for Dame Helen Alexander. She's the boss at Southampton University. She's the one who's the boss at Rolls-Royce. They've got links into the Murdoch cabal, Rebecca Brooks, and almost every story on the front page of my website takes you to the manipulators of the world, which have little meeting rooms in tiny villages like Chipping Norton, which is at one end of the Icknield Way, and all up the Icknield Way they have got ancient Roman allegiances to what were ancient superpowers when Julius Caesar began to launch Christianity in the massive fraud that is the Piso fraud. Just let me drop in something that I failed to mention on the religious fraud at this stage. The ancient name for the Nile that flows between Egypt and the Yemen, which is actually in the Bible the Garden of Eden. The name for that river, until around the 1960s, when they began to refine all of our ancient, in inverted commas, history, the name for that river is the Pishon, P-I-S-H-O-N. It's as open-ended as that. They are literally pissing on you through every media event that they have. The 2,000-year-old religious fraud is just that, And as we go down this page, we get more and more interlocks between the bastards like Johnny English, who's involved in the financial systems, like Captain Mainwaring, all of the Dad's Army characters, all of the Lord of the Rings characters, all of the people in popular culture and in comedy like Mr. Bean and Rowan Atkinson are laughing at our ancestors who died for our country, and at the concept that you should be dedicated enough to your country to be able to compete in elite sport in Olympics that used to be amateur by right but now are run entirely for professionals, for profit, and to keep the family groups active in those teams and in the commissioning of the massive costs of the Olympic and Football World Cup events. That brings in Princess Anne Lawrence on the English Business Registry, and the reason why the Lawrence case keeps getting relaunched in London, near the bus stop where I used to get onto the bus to Woolwich when I was doing my PhD in that relatively innocent town. Woolwich is now, as declared on my website and on the front page, the epicentre for intelligence operations in the UK. That's why 2 mosques were burned there. The Abid Diwali character is mentioned on my website. The index is down the side here, and up there in the top right, if you scan to the top, you will find a search index for all of these terms. Okay, so the religious fraud is massive. It takes you into nuclear weapons trading. This is the front page of my website. But what they've got in the global warming sector is a massive obfuscation tool for the damaging effects of Christianity over the centuries. Christianity was led by the missions. It was led by Magellan's fleet way back in the 1500s, and when they went to the South Pacific to introduce Christianity to the natives all across that massive oceanic continent, they took with them El Nino, which is an image of the baby Jesus, and that has now become associated with El Nino, the weather patterns, for shame and in a massive geopolitical and religious scandal. Okay, look at those videos, go to my website, listen to the uncontestable evidence that everything that happens in public life is a fraud to steal from the ordinary citizens and the worshippers and the pagans, none of whom are left alive on the place where God planted them, with the natural resources around them to make that self-sustaining and beautiful. Instead, we opt for the privately owned model, with the owners coming from distant continents and being involved with Prince Charles and the royals. Prince Charles, let me emphasize, is not the thinker in the team. Okay, then you get the massive war crimes. Okay, these are messages that were sent to my MPs that have been suppressed. When the MP refuses to accept my official letters and bails out of the cabinet and then claims that he has nothing on Hansard, you do not get a bigger breach of justice than when that occurs. That occurred several months ago in the middle of 2014, and everything that has happened to me since is resulting in my persecution, but no one will accept the evidence on Malcolm Rifkind, John Anthony Chilcot, and the creation of the Abraxa Company as a laundering vent for the illicit profits of the Arms to Iraq team through the city of Edinburgh and all of the vents in Lothian Road that we have exposed over the last 3 to 4 years. The temptation to align those 3 years of dedicated research, taking nothing for oneself, takes you into revelations in the Christian Bible, which is a total fraud. But God has read it, and they understand entirely that this system cannot get worse. They understand that by humans completely ignoring everything that the innocents declare, that is the problem with this country and its future. And the problem for all of the innocent peace-loving countries is that NATO is run by these bastards. That's the MP for Stratford-on-Avon again. We've got interlocked in these little paragraphs of news stories about the chief statistician for the country, Lord Michael Grade, TV celebrities, football players, England captains, England managers. All of them are interlocked into the frauds so that they cannot say boo to a goose. Which is why Madonna, Madge from the Windy City in Chicago, would do really well to desert her current owners and to come out as an activist for freedom for the world. Okay, we've mentioned the role of the Beatles in covering up the religious fraud. We've mentioned the vicious jokes of the Rolling Stones on the religious resurrection of Jesus Christ and the rolling away of that stone. It is openly abusive, it is openly childish, and it is openly genocidal at other people's expense as we run the war crimes trials. And when you look at the Godfather movie and the video I've made on the sham that is those war crimes trials, you can see that nothing that happens in government, nothing that happens in Hollywood, nothing that happens on your news screens is relevant to the future of the world. That's why I'm hoping that Madonna will see, like Britney Spears did, that the way to abuse your iconic leaders and your heroes is to let them become puppets like that little shit. That's Malky Rivkind. Spelt his name with a V, but because of the anti-Semitic consequences of that, he's changed it to an F. Yeah, he's one of the better off together profiteers, and there's the breaking news that we tried to break through our legitimate elected officers way back at the beginning of 2014. What they've done in response is to try and take the world to war against Islam. So let me give you the details there again. Michael Moore MP and the Derby representatives for Gordon Bowden refused to accept all of our correspondence on all of these massive issues. So this is the board at Abraxa, and it shows you the time period between 2000, when Malcolm Rifkind was Foreign Secretary for our august country. That's former UK Defence Secretary and Foreign Secretary, overlapping with the Arms to Iraq Inquest Chair, the Right Honourable Sir John Anthony Chilcot, for a couple of years in the lead up to Tony Blair's unilateral decision to take our country to war against the innocents in the Middle East, where Tony Blair is now a multi-millionaire and the envoy to those cheated and brutalized countries that never get a chance since the Holy Lands were declared to be a battle zone in the totally illegitimate Christian Bible, and all of the movies that Hollywood have made about it since. Okay, and there's a little picture of the Arms to Iraq inquest, and I don't have enough space to show you all of that. Let's see if we can scan a little bit further to the right. I'm going to zoom in so that I can show you with higher resolution some of those images that we've got. So there we see now the whole of the web page from left to right, and there we see Chilcot, a knight of the realm, as always, Sir John Anthony Chilcot, 1T, the Iraq Inquiry Chair. Another reason why Michael Moore has nothing on his Hansard transcript is because he was, when he was booted out of the cabinet, Secretary of State for Scotland. All of the corrupted Chinook crashes at the Mulligan Tyre, the Dunblane inquests, Michael Moore is privy to. That's why he's completely gagged now. The man is a criminal at massive shipping companies that include the P&O empire, and he runs that business out of a registered office in Dubai in the Arab Emirates. Okay, that is Jonathan Aitken. That is Jonathan Aitken with Mrs. Thatcher, and Mark Thatcher became a knight around the same time that these people were cheating and lying in the UK, were generating contracts in South Africa, were covering all of it up with the fast cars, motor racing sector involvement of people like him, and all of the petty results that impact even in democratic constituencies that are sleepy but right at the top of the Icknield Way. All roads lead to Rome. Have you heard the expression? The Romans were really clever. The things that they built were built to last, like the Roman wall and the Christian religion. It is ever so clever, but ever so brutal, and everything that democracy could be capable of is covered up for injustice by world leaders. And the only thing I can find in the media about interventions being made are the Washington Post on the electoral fraud perpetrated by Nixon. That is in the early 1960s, when America killed its peace-loving president, that's John F. Kennedy. Her mates in the Conservative Party had that done, and it was just after Winston Churchill had asked his ancient relatives out of Canada to come and celebrate Winston Churchill's golden wedding on the Côte d'Azur, where the war spoils are still being deployed around the privately owned swimming pool. Okay, you've now got the links to the Chipping Norton set. This is relatively well down the web page now, so this is news at the beginning of 2014 about Rebecca Brooks being an interlocking director with Cahills, who are advisors to Gordon Brown, and a string of people that were involved in the sectarian problems in Ireland. They all have to resign and get chucked in jail for token sentences. As the year unfolds, nothing happens beyond that. Yeah, everybody's involved in token trials. like Rebecca Brooks, she gets acquitted of everything she is charged of. The companies like the Girls' School and the Lonro cabal are run out of the Swiss banks like Malaria No More is. And she has got reams and reams of directorial interests through that Chipping Norton secret society that links her in to Lizzie Murdoch, the Freud family, and centuries of abuse at both ends of the Icknield Way, where the people swear oaths that their family will die for these illegitimate causes, and that even ancient things about stones and picking up pebbles and painting them and decorating them and leaving them by your house are related to occult activities that have nothing to do with democracy, but are still a fundamental part of how they steal from the people using the privately owned central bank. Yeah, that's why we've got the crown on everything that democracy should be capable of funding for itself. And there's Malcolm Rifkin's holdings beyond the Arms to Iraq inquest, where University of Warwick rules are deployed, which means that the University of Warwick, which is part of the Tom of Warwick joke about justice being done by kings in Britain. The King Arthur story was written by the Roman papacy. All of that has been revealed in very pristine religious research by people called Reuchlin and by George Lees, who gets paid nothing to try and restore society to competence. He does not resent that, but he does resent the fact that folk like Madonna are still stealing and cheating from their customers as they appear as enlightened guests on behalf of the world's tyrants at the Super Bowl and massive extravaganzas to divert the people and the masses from the crimes of the elected officials and the senators. Okay, so Rifkin's a director on G4S Holdings International AGI, British Assets Trust Public Limited Company, Public Emerging Markets Investment Trust PLC, Sea Energy PLC, Abraxa Limited, St Andrews Trust Public Limited. Yeah, that's Aberdeen Asset Management is also part of his holdings now. That is linked to David Murray and the business empire that takes you into Dunedin in New Zealand, that links you in to Todd Blackadder, the name Blackadder again used in financial services frauds in a tale of two cities, which are Edinburgh and Dunedin in New Zealand. Nobody in New Zealand owns anything in New Zealand because of the tyranny and the empire upon which the sun will never set until they give the natives a chance. Okay, so we're now on to old news at the beginning of the year and just workaday financial frauds. The murder and cover-up of innocent women in Wales, sacrifice to keep war crimes sacred and to allow people who are witnesses to the war crimes, and the massive involvement of intel in those war crimes. They're allowed to flee the country with false passports issued by companies like Baker and Mackenzie, where there are a number of Putin males involved in the company. And the woman Poulton, who's an activist in investigative journalist and pretends that she would lop the head off the Queen for her sins, she knows all about the crimes of Zahawi all about the cover-up of that, involving Shakespeare's falsified writings, but she will do nothing about it, because she is just a plant like the other investigative journalists that pledge their oath to kill their family members in ancient allegiances that are pathetic and are tied to the creators in the Roman uniforms of the Icknield Way. And they have a go at David Icke because he's a more obvious front man for that. Okay, that is all of the investigative journalists and political representatives that we have all around the world. They are on the take, and as long as they get their chunk, and as long as they do their thing for these ancient secret societies, for the skulls, for the old universities that are run by the super elites in America. You remember those stories that Greg told us about the lead up to every war, and every war leaving a legacy of more wars for the moneylenders? Watch the House of Rothschild movie again. I watched it the other day in the middle when the countries were being defrauded of their ownership of their own funding mechanisms. There was a massive snowstorm, lasted only for 10 minutes. All it takes is for the ordinary people to insist that their MPs become ordinary innocent representatives instead of being profiteers. Okay, we're now getting down to the nub of why I'm being persecuted in Scottish law, because this is now the part of my web page which was breaking news in the early part of the year, which is why we've missed and lost several planes in the South Pacific to cover up the massive crimes of our political representatives, but more seriously our constitutional monarchs, who've been up for grabs in a referendum in Scotland that could have been won had any of that information up there been released by the SNP or its activists about the massive crimes that are occurring in Westminster and in every university across our country against the children and the families that support these bastards in their political campaigns, blindly, without any insight into any real news that is occurring in our country, because of the murder by Rupert Murdoch and his teams of investigative journalists in the free press, like Sean Hoare, who was martyred as an alcoholic, in inverted commas, by Rupert Murdoch to keep the rest of our free press in fear. And the links that I've shown you to the local press, to the Walter Scott Foundation, to the Prince's Trust, that takes even our local papers in my region into the thrall of the illegitimate Royal Prince Charles. Okay, so more on Rifkind, more on the release of the treasonous information to Michael Moore, MP, John Lamont, MSP, Simon Montford. Since then I am unable to talk even to my local councillors in my region. Simon Montford is not a local, he was the head editor of the Yorkshire Post. He's a Freemason. He's been brought up into this region to completely dismember our local political representation. And Tom Weatherston, a school chum of mine, a rugby playing mate of mine, a strong and upstanding man with a nice family, has become a Conservative because it's the only route to power. He used to be the Labour representative. That typifies what has happened to society. The working man has no voice. All through this website you will see references to the Grangemouth issues, which takes you back to Lonro, takes you back to the pay rounds in Africa, where Lonmin the subsidiary of Lonro just shoots the blacks in its pay round, just like a Amristrar. And when the only person who's prepared to publish such things publishes them, the unions that are led by people on the court of the Bank of England take the money for themselves and run and entirely desert their membership. So the Ineos joke, Ineos is a joke at the Insus inscription on Jesus Christ's crucifix. That's the non-existent Jesus Christ who underpins the whole of the 2,000-year-old religious fraud that is mentioned right at the top of this web page in a series of interviews with Jim Fetzer in America. We have disclosed the massive religious fraud, the massive Mr. Bean jokes, the Mr. Bean jokes that take you in to the extension of World War I by 2 vicious genocidal years, and all of the corrupt American politics that are no longer a part of world history. You need to go a little bit beyond the front page of my website to get into that. What happened at Watergate is nothing at all. That's why Hollywood make films about it, and they write it up as an iconic period in America's history. It is a crock of lying shit to take the sheeple's attention off the crimes against them and the massive genocides against the peace-loving nations that keep occurring even as the EU awards itself the Nobel Peace Prize, that has gone in recent years to the world's biggest killer, who is Henry Kissinger. If you look for Kissinger in the index or in the search engine at the top, you will find the evidence that he and Nixon are massive genocidal killers, entirely to dismember their country's sovereignty, to pass on the sovereignty of world ownership to Israel in 2012, as declared in the interviews that I've made with Fetzer and have been declared in Fetzer's interviews with the late Greg Hallett, or the defected Greg Hallett. Okay, this is the massive financial scandals involving the Deutsche Bank, the massive financial institutions that are the IMF and Miss Lagarde's private property now. The French connection is uncontestable. I've mentioned the silk stockings and the links to the City of London and the City and Guilds and the Mercers. It is shocking that all of that sustains all wars through human history can still be part of secret societies that take the world to war and then get covered up by the free press in massive countries that have been run chaotically by design for all of that 2,000 fraudulent religious years. Okay, and you can see that the Knights of Malta, they have a religious vent to them that mean that people like Archbishop O'Brien, who's never been brought to justice, is also a Knight of Malta, like Jimmy Savile was. They're picked to groom the children, and the stories about grooming the children, the stories about the poorhouse, the stories about the illegitimacy of the royal family are summarised on the front page of my website. You don't need to buy a newspaper. There is no point in buying a newspaper. Everything that the people believe is a lie. That was a statement by the head of the FBI in America. His name was Casey, and when I was a child they used to make comic records about a chap called Casey at the dentist and in public life. That's to cover up the imposition of intel on public life in every sector, in every war, in every peace-loving country for all of human history, since this fraud began in the Roman court, using the Piso creativity to capture the false news and to write the New Testament as a profit stream. Okay, so that's Queen Victoria. Legal age of marriage 12 years. Prince George of Cumberland married her and sired her only legitimate child, which was born when she was 14. They never divorced. The royal family later had him killed when he was back in Germany. Marcus Manuel was reared by her on the Isle of Wight after her bigamous marriage to Albert. And Peter Sellers, in popular culture, acts in movies because he is also a bastard child in these families involving Lord Mountbatten, who later joined the narcotics trafficking efforts. There you've got the Wallis Simpson scandals, the fact that she's a hermaphrodite. You've got the parenthood of Her Royal Majesty the Queen and Bill Clinton, the President in America. All there are half brothers and sisters. That's the Queen and Bill Clinton, sired by artificial insemination by Winston Churchill. That's the maid, the one who took over when the Prince Eddie things happened, and she was asked to marry the imbecilic king who made the King's Speech because no one else would take him on. So she's an ordinary person, loved by the people, and she's loved by the people because she's one of them. She came from the downstairs sector and she liked a good stiff gin at the races. That's the GG joke. The races are where the horses are called the GGs, and when Governor General Quentin Bryce reveals the news that the Anzacs die in the conflicts that Britain take them into with a sense of humour, and she lets the story out that Mr. Bean was the war correspondent for Gallipoli, then the world of the establishment is really in turmoil, because the leaders are then shown to be genocidal bastards. Yeah, that's what I mentioned on Jim Fetzer that got his show shut down in midstream. He would not let me talk about the religious fraud, which we're now come to on my website. Okay, if you go to Faking the New Testament, you will see that in the old maps the Nile is the Pishon. Yeah, the old maps and the old laughs about Latin America, where the currency is the peso for centuries. Okay, and there we've got the love stories, a series of web pages, Queen Victoria, a persecuted royal love story, and another web page, Persecution in the Royal Bedchamber, how the Rothschilds have taken over the world. Links to narcotics and leadership teams, the illegitimate British monarchy, a constitutional global nightmare. Okay, Prince Charles is educated at Geelong School with the Murdoch family. The Geelong School is run by the Murdoch family. The Murdoch family is gifted its citizenship in the US by the CIA, which is run by the Skulls, the big banks, the Rockefellers, including Kermit Rockefeller, the joke about the cartoon characters. Yeah, everything they laugh at is a joke and a crime against the people. Okay, in the videos that we've made on religious fraud, you can see that everything that happens in Latin America, where the devout priesthood actually turn out to be genocidal friends of the juntas. They conduct the Caravan of Death and the Operation Condor genocides. They give confessions to the generals who get convicted of tokenistic crimes and then are released to be elites and to be members of the Club of Spain even after they have been booted out of legitimate, in inverted commas, political office. That is the president of Chile. That is the president of those massive countries in Latin America who could own themselves were it not for the master plan revealed by Greg Hallett and easy to interpret. Every central bank now across the globe is now owned by the same tyrants. Okay, there's some of the vicious religious jokes. The author of the New Testament, one of the big chunks was written by Arius Piso, and you can see that the Alpha to Omega joke on the Paschal candle in the Roman Catholic Church is a joke about the beginning and end of Arius Piso's name. And what I'm delighted about is that when I pointed out to the parish priest that they had printed at the bottom of the Paschal candle below the Omega bit that 2014 was effectively the end of the world, that has not come to pass because they are shit scared of being exposed as genocidal leaders like Pope Pius XII and Archbishop Hudel were. Those are the Nazi popes, and the links to Austria that meant that Hitler was gifted Germany for his role as a team player in the massive plan to take the world to war entirely for profit. And the religious fraud is totally understood by the people who can read and write in Greek and Latin for all of that 2,000-year period. Now everybody, including my local parishioners, understand it, and they know that I'm here on behalf of the gods that created the universe. I don't know how many there are. I know that they are on my side. Lord Patton's disappearance since May the 17th, when the BBC reported his heart attack, typifies the fear that that has engendered in the Quisling media, and why we get no news at all other than massive outbreaks of Ebola in African continents, which also involves my family group, and its trips in corrupted charities to nations in sub-Saharan Africa who never get a life, who never get to share what we've had for a couple of 100 years already in healthcare, in finance, in infrastructure. Nothing that we have and we could share with them perpetually is given to them. Instead, we take from them is corrupted charitable activities, what they have already given as their families' lives and their children's future. Okay, there's the Pope when he was helping with the junta leaders in the Operation Condor exercises. He gets to change his name a couple of times to alter his identity, which is really useful if you're a university leader like Brian Cox, with 5 elite homes in America, now sacking academics at Dundee University because he has the power. That's Brian Cox, the Hollywood icon, not the nuclear physicist and the diversion from every sectarian crime that means that NATO's armies are in Afghanistan and in Kurdistan for the narcotics wealth, and because Tony Blair told them to go there in allegiance with George W. Bush. That is the son of George Poppy Bush, which is a joke about the religious fraud for 2,000 years. Poppaea was Nero's wife in the Roman court, and when you look at Elizabeth Taylor's movies with Richard Burton on the crooked carving up of the Middle East and Egypt and the allegiance of these people to each other, and their capacity to believe that they are more powerful than God. Julius Caesar was the founder of the Christian Church. It is no coincidence that his initials are JC. All of the power base through all of that period, where all roads lead to Rome or to the narcotics wealth, are entirely for profit, and it is an ancient joke. And there is the owner of the poppy fund until people like me begin to get on his trail. When we get on his trail, he has a cardiovascular accident too, and limps along like the new Pope, even at his inauguration. The images of the inauguration and the massive lightning strikes on the Vatican have all been taken down by the quislings who work for the church, which is working for bastards like him. Okay? Douglas Haig, the boss at St Andrews University. This is still the front page of my website. None of this news comes out. Okay? The British Legion director is the Duke of Westminster. He has a 7 million litigation fund, so that if anybody turns the guns on the British Legion, where he is the director, that's Britain's richest man, who owns the estates near Path Head and enslaves all of the working men in that region, including many ordinary working men and agricultural labourers that I have loved through all of my life. They are family members, but they still prefer to desert the working man in favour of the super elites, who keep them as agricultural labourers, and they have a really serious problem about going to confession in the Catholic Church. I know all about that now. I know that that family and those family members have guilt. That's on the Catholic side of the spectrum. We have also career members of the religious fraud on the Church of Scotland side of my family. They pretend that they work for their children. They dismember the whole of the world's children by perpetrating a massive religious fraud as a career activity. They work as civil servants in healthcare. They asset strip even that sector of their lives. Yeah, and they are already organised leaders, even in the Girl Guide movement. They dedicate their whole lives to people with dubious motives and link it to morality. Okay? They are not nearly as bad as him. He has asset stripped Britain's greatness as a career activity, duty bound to do it, and he was an original member of the drug running triumvirate that Greg Hallett described, along with the other sires of the Queen's illegitimate babies. That's Lord Plunket and Lord Porchester, from the Bourne region in the south of England, where the chalk streams are, and the lovely that literature is written about the fishing world, and how, because of mismanagement, the English fisheries were worthless within a few years of their creation, and the presentation of artificial, non-natural stock or bloodlines in those streams. Yeah, I've got the books that back that up here. They still don't understand why the rivers and the bloodlines and the fish do not thrive, but they all understand the joke that the fish is the human penis. They all understand the need to laugh at the cock and bull stories at the cock crows 3 times and the desertion of your innocent cause, which is the desertion of the mythical icon Jesus Christ. Okay, still the front page. That's where the truth comes out about the authorship of the Bible. It is a master plan to take over the world, and it is still working like a dream today. Okay, here are some of the stories that you get from the Free Press. If you can read that one, you will understand why he is not an electoral criminal. He is a genocidal bastard. That is Nixon. That is Lucky Luciano, who helped him to kill returning troops in Italy and in France after they had fought for the Axis powers in World War II in a massive profiteering exercise. There you've got the escapees from the Dunblane massacre who were gifted the NATO headship as a result, and that is part of Michael Moore's cover-ups, because the gun license for the killer in Dunblane was issued by him and signed off by him. Okay, there you've got Pompidou, de Gaulle. All of them are tied in to the Anglo-American narcotics industry and to the involvement of Henry Kissinger in becoming an American dominated sector. The mafia stories about the Sicilian mafias, they are relatively minor players compared to the Yanks and the French, and the murders and the genocide in sub-Saharan Africa and in French colonial Africa are revealed in the Great Heroin Coup by Henrik Kruger. Okay, that is a must. Here is the Greg Hallett stuff on Jackie O's second partner, Onassis, his involvement and his friendship with Winston Churchill in the running of the narcotics in the South Pacific, the use of sonar buoys depicted here, so that the narcotics stashes which were dropped from planes commissioned by Churchill so that they could be picked up by the British Navy, which Prince Philip runs for 30 years, and there are the other members of the triumvirate, Porchester and Plunkett, with the children in the royal family that look just like them, because they are gifted the drug running capacity, because they get the rights of sex with HRH, because Prince Charles has already lost her favour in the bedroom. The Dutch royals get tied into this as well, which is why in the 1960s you have massive floods across the Dutch coast, and that leads to, in those flood prone terrains, massive problems for society. That's the Nazi headship of the Dutch monarchy that run the KLM airlines, that run Royal Dutch Shell, as a global tyranny exercise, when all of their countries could have the benefits of all of that oil wealth and their transport infrastructure almost for free. But instead it's like funding for democratic activities in our country. All of it goes to the top of the food chain, and that is Princess Anne and Prince Philip. Princess Anne Lawrence, later in the year she's prepared to eat horsemeat burgers because of the veracity of this story coming out. When the Dutch royals became involved in the cocaine trafficking out of Holland, they put the cocaine in electric light tubes, Philips light tubes. Do you remember that? That is the joke. And the sonar buoys and the Philips light tubes are why all of those planes went missing for all of those months earlier in 2014. Yeah? Everything is an allegiance to the illegitimate bastards who own our world, and the press despoil that world relentlessly on behalf of the illegitimate leaders who, like Madonna, proclaim in their electoral pamphlets that are beginning to drop through my door in the preparation for the 2015 general election, which will be another deceitful sideshow by all of these bastards. Okay, let me show you how the panic has been engendered. That is the Governor General in Australia. She is called Quentin Bryce. When I revealed her news that Mr. Bean was the jocular war correspondent for Gallipoli, who covered the Armenian genocides so that Winston Churchill and the Balfours could take over the oil wealth on the Russian steppes, then the shit hits the fan. That's when Princess Anne proclaims that yet the forensic testing in our cycling has been accurate and inaccurate for all of those decades where Lance Armstrong won all of the trophies for America. But when the news comes out that her family are literally bastards in the marital sector, then she pretends that she would justifiably eat horse meat. She's a profiteer on the board of the London Olympics joke, where the London Olympics joke was presented by Rowan Atkinson, playing Chariots of Fire and taking the piss out of Britain's war dead as they run for their country on a Sunday when they should be worshipping the fictitious Jesus Christ. There is the real Mr. Bean writing a story about the genocides conducted entirely to plan by Winston Churchill so that the Rothschilds and he could own the oil wealth on the Russian steppes. Okay, all of it is written into the Godfather movies. The trial of Martin Bormann is actually the trial of Frank Pentangeli in that movie, and when you see the operatic scenes that close out that saga, you can see that all roads lead to Rome, and the dress code in the opera house where the assassins are operating is exactly the same as the dress code in the Gladiator movie, and to some extent in the persecution of Jesus Christ, with the same initials as Julius Caesar. Okay, there we have some of the jokes about the Ku Klux Klan, which take in the Costa Concordia ship. The actual Greek initials for that ship were KKK. Senator Bilbo is a Ku Klux Klan member who loves to string up the black men in America. There's the Pope giving confession and communion to the general in the junta led by Pinochet. His name is Videla, and there's another genocidal general in Spain that supports all of the uprising, the Spanish Revolution. Spain, remember, is neutral in wartime. There's the links to the horses and the GGs of Rebecca Brooks, the person who cannot be convicted of anything, yeah, because she is a friend of Prime Minister Cameron's in Chipping Norton. Okay, I'm off to church in a few minutes, and there is the Wargraves joke. When you begin to laugh at your ancestors' ultimate sacrifice, then the camel's back begins to cave. That's Camilla. The camel's back is the camel coat joke. Camilla and Camille was a Roman general that convicted and persecuted and massacred the Jewish revolutionaries in the ancient religious wars that occurred around the creation of Christianity. From the time that was the year dot when Jesus was born in a stable, the hippos joke, everything is a joke about the GG. Hippos is the Greek name for horse, and because of the close links to the Piso name, like the Pishon River, they have to fucking change it, because now they're accused of being war criminals, and at the same time they try and sustain the much loved monarch label. Princess Anne was completely perplexed by that. She gave up all residual integrity. The royal children began to appear in front of dead rare species like their parents had done in the 1960s, because then they had the power to cheat and to laugh with impunity. There's the Jesus joke on Palm Sunday. Jesus never existed. In the eyes of these people, Jesus is the fucking donkey, which is why the Scottish Borders Council have David Murray's golf course right next to its donkey sanctuary, run by the people that cheat the public servants and the council workers of their 7-year salary rise. That's David Murray, the legless bastard, the victim of the act of God, the man who defrauded Rangers twice, using Aberdeen Asset Management, Rifkin's company, and took all of Rangers' greatness into his registered business headquarters in Dunedin, where Todd fucking Blackadder used to be the coach of the Christchurch team when it came to visit that tiny little city that is Dunedin, that is in the thrall of Edinburgh's secret societies even today as we speak, and manipulates the course of justice all across the British Commonwealth. Okay, we're getting near the bottom of my front page of my website, and we're getting near the hub of that massive New World Order band joke. There is the launch of the Rolling Stones career with the brutalization of Vietnam on the album cover. The Rolling Stone pictured here is a joke about Jesus' tomb and Jesus being resurrected. Yeah, all of the Beatles songs are frauds. Greg Hallett has explained how Operation Winnie the Pooh got all of the Nazis out of Germany, including Hitler, Martin Bormann and Eva Braun in her little blue dress. There's a picture of the female gender being chased naked in a country that has nothing to do with America by American troops, and the napalm cloud is following her closely. If you go to the prostitution dens, the narcotics that are being consumed there by American troops were delivered by Nixon and his friends, including Kissinger. They were in Coca-Cola plants. That's Coke. The cocaine stash for the Dutch royals was in Philips light tubes. In Vietnam, the cocaine was in the Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola plants planted there by the Americans. That's the first Jewish Pope, Pope Paul II. Okay, all of it is documented in carefully archived work by the Hitchcock man, who's a historian on the involvement of the Rothschilds in every financial fraud across the world. He explained to me, that's Andrew Carrington Hitchcock. He's a friend of mine. He produces all of the truths about the tyranny of the Rothschilds, but not about what they are currently doing on the business register. And if you want to see that, then look at my videos. I've got up at the top of the index, I'll take you there now, so it's very important that you are able to find this stuff. Up at the top left, you can find that right at the top of that introductory page, you'll find that I have now inserted a block of videos. How to take over. Okay, so there's the introduction, and down here I would have to scan in again. Let's do that. Okay, you can change the resolution and to show you all of the images. Okay, so there we've got introduction, and that's the page that we're looking at today. That's the whole year's news on one page. You can read it all on my website this morning before you go to church, chapel, the Mormons, wherever it is you go. You need to realize that your mind has been captured by world leaders, and it afflicts the future of all of your children. Okay, there is the chapter Lee's videos, page 1 of 2. That shows you all of the workaday financial crimes that are being perpetrated in our once great countries, in inverted commas. Okay, where were we? We were down to the Pope, we were down to the Quentin Bryce issues, we were down to the fact that David Murray loves to laugh at Jesus Christ as being the donkey on Palm Sunday. And David Murray must realise that the reason he is legless is because acts of God are carefully targeted at people that have the capacity to laugh at the creators of our universe, and suddenly realise that there is a God and that they are in desperate trouble because of the way that they have abused those gods and the teams that they work in and the elements that work closely with them when the roads become slippery in the winter time. Okay, there's about all of the genocides, all about the cross-party and cross-country traitors who trained in Tavistock in World War II,